Welcome to Rays of Hope, where inspiration meets possibilities. Join us on this journey as we explore videos that illuminate the path to positivity, resilience, and success. Psychological approaches to ego, key theories and insights. What's the deal with our ego, and why does it matter? Understanding the ego is key to grasping human behavior and mental health. The ego shapes how we perceive ourselves and interact with others. It can be both a driving force and a stumbling block in our lives. By exploring psychological perspectives on ego, we can unlock valuable insights into our actions and emotions. From Freud's groundbreaking theories to modern interpretations, we'll cover essential concepts you need to know. This video will help you get a clearer picture of what makes us tick and how we can better manage our well-being. Understanding the ego. Exploring the ego helps us understand our actions and emotions better. It's a cornerstone concept in psychology, affecting how we see ourselves and navigate through life. Grasping the basics of ego and its functions can give us insights into our mental health and personal growth. Definition of ego. The ego is a complex term with various definitions depending on the psychological theory. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, introduced the ego as part of his structural model of the psyche, alongside the id and superego. According to Freud, the ego is the rational part of the mind that mediates between our primal desires, id, and our moral standards, superego. It's the ego's job to balance these conflicting demands in a realistic way. In Carl Jung's analytical psychology, the ego is seen as the center of our consciousness. It's what makes you aware of your own identity and experiences. Jung believed that the ego works alongside the unconscious mind to help you realize your full potential. Modern psychology often views the ego a bit differently. It's considered an essential part of our self-identity and self-esteem. The ego helps us to understand who we are and how we fit into the world around us. Functions of the ego. The ego plays several key roles in our daily lives. Let's break down its primary functions. 1. Self-perception. The ego shapes how we see ourselves. It helps you define your self-concept, who you think you are. This self-awareness is crucial for personal development and self-esteem. 2. Decision-making. The ego is responsible for making decisions by rationalizing choices and evaluating options. When you're faced with a tough decision, it's your ego that weighs the pros and cons to help you choose the best course of action. 3. Maintaining mental stability. The ego also acts as a buffer against stress and anxiety. It helps you cope with reality by using defense mechanisms like denial, repression, or rationalization. These mechanisms protect your mind from overwhelming thoughts and feelings, making it easier to function in everyday life. Understanding these functions highlights the importance of nurturing a healthy ego. By doing so, we can better manage our emotions, make sound decisions, and maintain mental balance. Freud's psychoanalytic theory. Sigmund Freud introduced a groundbreaking theory that divides the mind into three parts: the id, ego, and superego. These elements interact continuously, shaping our thoughts, emotions, and actions. Understanding this dynamic can provide deep insights into human behavior. The id, ego, and superego. Freud's structural model is like a mental balancing act. Each part of the mind has its own role. The id, the id, is the most primitive part of our psyche. It's driven by basic urges and desires, like hunger, sex, and aggression. It operates on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification without considering consequences. The ego is the rational part of the mind. It develops to mediate between the unrealistic id and the external real world. Operating on the reality principle, the ego aims to satisfy the id's desires in socially acceptable ways. Think of it as the planner that keeps us out of trouble. The superego acts as our moral compass. It incorporates the values and norms we learn from our parents and society. It's divided into the conscience, which punishes us with feelings of guilt, and the ego ideal, which rewards us with feelings of pride. These three components are constantly interacting. The ego has the tough job of balancing the demands of the id, the strict rules of the superego, and the constraints of reality. Ego defense mechanisms. Freud also proposed that the ego uses various defense mechanisms to protect itself from anxiety and internal conflict. These mechanisms distort reality in some way but help us cope with stress. Here are some common ones. Repression. This involves pushing uncomfortable thoughts out of conscious awareness. For example, someone might repress memories of a traumatic event. Denial. Denial is refusing to accept reality or facts. An example is a smoker refusing to acknowledge the health risks of smoking. Projection. This involves attributing your own unwanted feelings to someone else. If you're angry but unwilling to admit it, you might accuse someone else of being angry with you. Rationalization. Here, you create a seemingly logical reason or explanation for behavior that's actually driven by unconscious impulses. For instance, someone who failed a test might blame the questions for being unfair rather than their lack of preparation. Displacement. This involves shifting emotional responses from their real target to a safer substitute. If you're angry at your boss, you might take it out on your family instead. Sublimation. This is considered a more positive defense mechanism, where unacceptable impulses are transformed into socially acceptable actions. An aggressive person, for example, might become a professional athlete. Understanding these defense mechanisms can help us recognize when we're avoiding difficult truths and encourage us to confront our real feelings. By doing so, we can work towards healthier ways of coping with life's challenges. Carl Jung's analytical psychology. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist, developed analytical psychology. This theory focuses on understanding the unconscious mind and its relationship to the ego. Jung's insights bring to light some unique concepts that shape our self-awareness and personal growth. The persona and shadow. Jung introduced the concepts of the persona and shadow, two crucial aspects that relate to the ego. The persona is a mask we wear to present ourselves to the world. Think of it as our social identity. It shapes how we interact in different social settings, like at work or with friends. The persona isn't our true self. It's more like a role that helps us fit into society. For instance, you might act differently at a job interview than at a family gathering. This adaptability helps us navigate various social situations smoothly. The shadow, on the other hand, consists of the parts of ourselves we hide or deny. These can be negative traits like anger or jealousy, but they can also be positive attributes that we're ashamed to show. The shadow lurks in the unconscious and often clashes with the persona. When we ignore or repress our shadow, it can lead to inner conflict and stress. Acknowledging and integrating your shadow can lead to greater self-awareness and mental health. These two elements are deeply connected to the ego. The ego tries to balance the outward mask, persona, with the inner truth, shadow. This balancing act is essential for genuine self-understanding. Individuation process. Jung's process of individuation is all about achieving psychological wholeness. This journey involves integrating various parts of the self, including the ego, to become a complete individual. Individuation is a lifelong process where the ego plays a central role. The goal is to bring the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind into harmony. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the first part of our exploration into psychological approaches to the ego. Stay tuned for the next part. Please comment, like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for more videos that spark hope and empowerment. Thank you for watching.